Hello, and welcome back to the show! Before we get started, make sure you like, share, and leave a comment at the end of the video. And if you like the show and want more, make sure you check out our Patreon, where you can access content like behind-the-scenes vlogs, previews for up-and-coming projects, gaming sessions, and exclusive bonus episodes. Also, make sure you check out our Etsy shop for merch. We have plenty of shirts, mugs, and even stickers. And lastly, if you want to follow us elsewhere, look for @RianPodsFunny on all other platforms. Now on with the show. Hello, and welcome back to It's a Spectrum, where we explore a little bit more of the first-person perspective of people with neurodivergencies. Today, we're joined by Jennifer Msumba. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I was actually very excited to come across your page. It's kind of hard for me to, what is it? Not acclimate, accumulate a roster sometimes. Yeah. And so literally, it sounds silly, but literally I typed in autism vlog so that I could specifically find people who were autistic talking about autism. And you were the first one that came up. So that was pretty cool.
Wow. Cool.
So usually we start with a general question. Can you share a little bit about your experience, your journey with your diagnosis, like where it started and things like that?
Yeah, sure. So, like, without giving up my age and stuff, but like when I was a kid, autism wasn't something that was really on any doctor's radar. That it was not something people talked about or considered, especially if you were verbal. That was not something they considered. But they knew something was going on with me at school. They were always pulling me out for testing, and my parents were always taking me to professionals. And I was diagnosed with sensory processing disorder as a little girl. And also, and when they would do the tests, I remember the language test, the vocabulary, she was asking me what to pronounce all these words, and I finished the test all the way through 12th grade, and I was in 4th grade, and she said, you just finished all the way to 12th grade. And so it was like a disconnect because my behavior and the troubles I were having were different than my abilities. And then when I got to be a teenager, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. And so everything was there, but that final piece of the puzzle. And actually, it wasn't until about 15 years ago when I was diagnosed as on the autism spectrum at my new facility that I was at. The facility I still live in I guess we could talk about that later, but I live in like a transitional living facility since I was a teenager.
Right. I think that's interesting. Because I've had other guests that have talked about this specific concept of like, especially people of color, especially women of color, tend to be later diagnosed, and a lot of it is accumulation of different biases and misunderstandings. Yeah. One of the biggest ones being, and I learned this recently, that on average, one of the specific signs that is less frequent in women and female presenting non-binary is what's the term? There's a specific term, verbal competency, I think.
Okay. That makes sense.
Like often one of the signs they look for is people that don't speak early on, and that's less frequent, I found out, in women and that's one of the things that leads to a higher misdiagnosis and late diagnosis rate in specifically women of color. And that was because I can see the parallels between what you've described in your story and my own personal story and how I've seen it, because in a similar circumstance, there were earlier signs, but the school that I was at, they didn't necessarily have the funding or the expertise to pursue something about it. All they could do was recommend stuff to my mom.
Right.
And it was a thing where like we didn't even know what autism was as a diagnosis until like I was in middle school. And even with that, it wasn't until, kind of a silly story, it wasn't until my mom saw the movie Temple Grandin that she started to see the association
Yeah.
between me and this character. And so that, I would say, her drive to like push them to figure it out, not my school, but like the therapist and specialist that I was going to, is probably one of the reasons why I was diagnosed at the time that I was, rather than
Yeah.
later on as an adult, like most of the people that I've come across.
That's funny you should say that, because my mom was constantly reading like how to help me and trying to learn what was going on with me, because she knew, the doctors would come up with this schizoaffective and all these diagnoses that really don't have to me, like, what do you mean by that? I think they just didn't know what to say. And my mom was constantly on the search for answers, and she read about Asperger's. And I remember she kept telling them that she thinks that I had Asperger's at the time that was a diagnosis.
Right.
But they already had me pegged in a corner with certain diagnosis, and they were just sticking with that. So it wasn't until I got a full reset. The placement I was at before where I live now, it was a notorious place, but they don't they don't believe in diagnosis or medication. So everything kind of got erased back to zero. And then, so when I left there, that's when I was diagnosed on a spectrum. Anyways, that's really interesting to learn what you just told me. I didn't know all that. So,
Right.
Learning.
So can I ask, I saw from a recent video you posted that you've recently gotten back into posting to YouTube. When did your original YouTube journey start, like with the vlogging and everything?
I think I might say it started in 2014, maybe. Yeah, and I thought I was going to be Casey Neistat. Like, I just thought I was going to copy what he did and do like that. But I soon realized I just needed to be myself.
Right.
And then things were going good.
That's cool. I think that's funny because that's around the same time that I was. So I was diagnosed at around age 14 or 15. But when I graduated, which was 2013, so the year before, I started to look into things for myself. And so I feel like our journeys interacting with the autism community kind of started around the same time, because that was when this was before TikTok, which has become like a major resource as far as finding other people.
Right.
But that was when I started to like follow the Department of Rehabilitation websites and the Department of Disorders and Neurodivergencies and things like that. And it's been a weird journey. One of the things that's become interesting is like I don't know if you've experienced this, but so I do stand up, and my pursuit of stand up kind of fed into my ability to, for lack of a better phrasing, mask better.
Oh my goodness, yes. I was about to ask you this question. Go ahead.
Well, because one thing that I found interesting, so it's a little bit hit and miss with how it registers, and I can't always tell when it's not registering with people. Mm-hmm. But I believe when I was first getting diagnosed, they were trying to. I think back then I would have been called high functioning, borderline Asperger's. Now, if I were to be reassessed, I believe I'm teetering between level 1 and level 2. Primarily because even though I have specific like developmental struggles that I still struggle with, and like a lot of memory retention issues, I am vocal, and I am like what's the word someone said once? Eloquent when I speak, and a lot of that is because I was pursuing comedy. So I was going to ask if you experienced anything similar.
Yeah, I used to. Okay. People don't believe me, but before I started doing YouTube, I was painfully shy. Like I wouldn't, I guess the word shy, but also like didn't want to speak to people, very to myself. And I started out doing, because I'm a musician, so I would do piano videos, and I would just set the iPad up like at my hand so you could see the piano. I never spoke anything. I just made like cover videos. And one day I reached 5,000 subscribers on my music channel. So I went face to face with the camera and said thank you, and people were like, we like when you talk more. So it got me thinking, and that's when I started my second channel, my vlog. And it was really hard for me at first, and I learned by watching back myself. It helped me become a better speaker. It helped me with conversation, having conversations, because I was able to watch myself back and kind of evaluate, and just the practice of talking to the camera, and it just helped me move forward in my development in that area. So yes, I agree with that.
No, yeah, I definitely relate to that. I think that when people hear me speak, especially like in this platform as a podcast host, a lot of them are surprised that I had kind of like borderline debilitating social anxiety. Like when I was coming out of going back to what I was saying, when I was coming out of high school, I had to take socialization training. It was not exactly what's it called, behavioral therapy, but it was something pointed at like my ability to interact publicly.
Yeah.
Specifically, what the training was we'd, it was kind of like group therapy. We'd start by sharing about ourselves, and then we would practice interacting with each other, and they'd make up scenarios for us to practice. And when you see me, like if you were to see me at the time, it was a lot more limited than it is now, and it was a lot more reserved, and it still didn't have the same impact as comedy as far as like my public speaking.
Right.
I would say well into like me being 21, I needed someone around me when I was in public in case I didn't have the energy, like the mental capacity or the mental energy to speak on my own. Like literally, we'd be going to the movies. I'd be paying for it. I'd be paying for the bus and everything and bringing my little brother, but he'd have to physically order the tickets and order the food because I couldn't I had an issue talking to strangers. And then I started doing stand up, and something specific like clicked in my head where like I was developed in stand up. A lot of people are an emphasized version of themselves. So even though they are, even people that are like storyteller type stand-ups who are specifically telling like anecdotes from their life, they are still creating a persona to project, which essentially is like, in my opinion, like a huge aspect of how a lot of autistic people mask. And so when that clicked in my head, I was able to replicate that in public, and then that kind of ingrained into how I speak now. Like, definitely I was more eloquent and more social with people I was comfortable with, but it was still not to this level until after I started doing stand-up for a while.
That's really cool. You do stand-up. It's really neat.
And I like your music. I only found out recently after I discovered your vlog a couple of weeks ago. But I like your music.
Thank you.
And you're kind of multifaceted. Like you wrote a book and recently released a movie, or it's going to release?
Yeah, my film is in post-production.
Post-production.
Right. Yep.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what those are about?
Sure. Well, my book is called Shouting at Leaves, and it's a memoir, but I didn't want it to be like a narcissistic type memoir.
Right.
Like, oh, this is my life and you just want to read about it. Like, no, I wanted it to be using what I'd gone through in my life. I want to like specifically help people on the spectrum or family members of folks on the spectrum. So I would tell like stories from like anecdotes or things that from my life, but I would also like, then I would go into what I learned and kind of show people like, hopefully it just can help. What took me years and years and years to go through and lose out on a lot of things in life because of, I was hoping to like help people like realize them sooner so that it could just be helpful. And I really wanted to write about I went through horrendous institutional abuse my whole life since I was placed in institutions. And I wanted people to know like what goes on in those places. And it was important to me to get that down on paper, published, especially about the Judge Rotenberg Center, which was, I was there, the last place I was. And so I wrote about all that in my book, but it's a hopeful book. It's not like a miserable book.
No, yeah, but I do think stuff like that's important. You know, I think that especially when it's coming from a first person perspective, some people can find it uncomfortable, but I think it's important to acknowledge that, like, while a lot of that is outdated, that does not necessarily mean that it is no longer used. And there's a lot of it that still trickles into today that like a lot of these facilities are still open, unfortunately.
Oh yeah. They're running and going strong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember even like a couple of years before, maybe 2019, I was still hearing about stories of kids who were now adults in a similar situation where they essentially like not well, yeah, like they essentially escaped that situation and they were like either living with family or living in housing similar to the one you described. And it can be difficult, especially not to get, you know, political, but it's especially that like a lot of this stuff is taking a hit in the last decade. I remember that there used to be several different kind of housing organizations out here in my area on the West Coast, and when I was graduating, it was a concern about whether or not I could function on my own to this specific degree of living on my own, and so that was one of the first things I looked into, and by the time that Obama was out of office and we kind of switched into different presidencies, the funding for those things had been cut so much that when I called these organizations, all I could get were the people that actually worked in the building. None of them knew what the program was. They just knew that they managed a building.
Oh, wow.
And there was no one left to, it was either all like what was left from the automated systems or
right.
It was like, there was no one left to take new cases. And the current cases were kind of just, I don't want to say abandoned, but like I don't think anyone was checking on them. A lot of people had moved out by then because the funding had been cut so substantially. Yeah. And so yeah, it's a definitely rocky waters to traverse right now, especially if you're getting diagnosed now.
For sure. I was kind of locked into getting help from, because I'm older, I got like locked into a case, so that I have had help my whole life since then. But I don't think those things are as easy to get these days to get the help. Yeah.
So is there anything that you can share about the movie that you're releasing? I know that you said it's in post-production.
I'm very excited about this movie. It's a documentary, and it's specifically about the Judge Rotenberg Center. I don't know how much if you've heard anything about. Have you ever heard of the Judge Rotenberg Center?
I believe I've heard of it. I think that it is one of the places
electric skin shock place that uses. Yeah. So they're still going strong, and I got a grant to turn one of my short documentaries into a feature film from Adobe through Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge. And with that grant, I was able to produce my documentary, and it's pretty much just about that experience and that place. But I just, the only way I got through that experience, I was there for 7 years. And the only way I could stay sane was to tell myself, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to let the world know what's going on in here. And I was trying to make a documentary for a long time. It takes money, and you have to know people. And finally I built up to that, and I got this grant, and I just went with it. And now it's expanding, and we have executive producers and trailer editors. I'm really excited for it.
No, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Do you know right now, is there an estimate to like the release date, like when it'll be officially out?
Yeah, so we're planning to get it out. We're planning to have it finished and ready for release this year. So I asked my producer, I think by the end of this year or like maybe the fall. Now how that goes with distribution and everything, I don't know if it'll take longer, but it's in its final stages. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the biggest thing I'm excited for is that your project is specifically made by you and backed by you, especially after a kind of an unacknowledged half decade of like attempts to tell autistic stories but not include autistic voices.
Yeah.
Like we've seen, you know, with what was that one that Sia made music?
Oh yeah, there was one before that I saw. Like I was like, oh, I'll just watch this. You know, I was clicking through. I was like, this is cringe. It was no one was autistic, and they were just, and it was overly like over the top. It was insulting. It was
right,
yeah.
especially like there's a couple movies that come out that are along the same stories. It's always like either someone who has come into taking care of an autistic child, or it's like a single parent who's coming up with an autistic child and then fighting for it. And it's you know, I can understand it's inspiring stories, and I do think that things are getting better, like they are incorporating autistic actors, but there's still that missing component of like the first person perspective of the autistic. It always feels like it's a story being told by the caretaker of someone autistic rather than the autistic person themselves. And that's not to dismiss that there are people, especially on the you know, levels 2 and 3, who struggle specifically with communicating for themselves.
Right.
But I don't believe that that's enough to dismiss the community as a whole. Or at least, I want to phrase this correctly. I don't think that that is justification enough to dismiss the voices entirely, or even not attempt to hear them out in the first place.
I know when I was at the Rodenberg Center, I was there with a lot of autistic individuals in the adult workshop, and a lot of them were, you know, like what I guess you go by level, you know, 2 and 3, and the staff just looked right through them, like they were nothing, or like they didn't have anything to say. And I was in this room. I'm with everybody. We're all together, and I learned to communicate with everybody in that room, and the staff that were there just assumed a lot of the others individuals couldn't communicate, and it wasn't true. You just had to find like a different way to, and I feel like one thing that makes me cringe is when a caretaker says, "I am their voice." I'm like, I understand where you're coming from, because like they maybe physically can't speak, but like every individual human we have wants and needs and choices and opinions and feelings. And I don't think anyone can truly be another person's voice, you know?
Right, exactly. Like it's never going to be 100%. And there are more than a few cases. What I found out specifically was nonverbal autistic people only take up about, I don't want to get it wrong, but I believe it's about 41% of the community, which means it's not even more than half. It's specifically less than half. And even in that, that statistic does not include people who communicate non-verbally. Like there's even a smaller percentage that's included in that of people that maybe can't vocalize their words, but they use touchpads, they use sign language. Some of them invent their own sign language.
Yeah.
You know, I've met several individuals who communicated alternatively to actual vocal speaking, and they still, for the most part, are able to create functioning lives on par with like at least what I've been able to cultivate for myself as someone who can speak and has autism.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's like very refreshing to actually have someone not only have a production meant for the community, but it's coming from the community, because it's literally your voice, and not like someone speaking on your behalf.
My head hurts.
There's a T for that.
I'm also sick.
There's a T for that.
And I can't sleep.
Aw.
Well, there's a tea for that.
Where are you finding all these teas?
Legacy Teas and Spices, of course.
What if I just want black tea?
They have that.
What if I get tired of regular tea?
Well, you're in luck. Legacy has a wide array of blended teas and flavors, including favorites like Peach Lavender Rose, Passion Fruit Hibiscus, and the all-time bestseller, Vanilla Lemongrass. Here, see for yourself.
Wow, I can't wait to try it.
Make sure to go to legacyteasandspices.com and use coupon code Rian20 for 20% off.
Is there anything else you're currently working on? As far as like, is there anything interesting coming up with the vlog or any new music coming out?
Just no, I don't have any new music planned to come out, but I have a bunch of new music, just not releasing it right now. But I did just sign with the Just Call Me by My Name label. 3 of my songs with that goes through Daniel's Music Foundation, which was really cool. That was my first time signing like officially. So that was fun. And I've just been relaxing. I kind of been into consuming art or consuming films right now. I started collecting DVDs because I like some of the older movies, and I go to the thrift store and I get them for literally like 10 cents. This lady was like, that'll be 10 cents. And I'm like, lady, I'll just give you $1. Okay. And then she gave me but I've just really been into like Star Trek right now. Everything Star Trek Lower Decks is my favorite. And also Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I'm quite a bit obsessed with that series right now. I know that's not what I'm working on, but I just had to say it because that's what I've been doing is like kind of, I've been highly focused on those things right now and consuming those things.
No, I definitely get that. Sometimes people ask like what I've been up to and I'm just like watching TV.
Yeah.
I because so I don't know. So my diagnosis is what's the word? There's a specific term I always forget. The official medically used term is comorbid. I don't like using that word personally because of the word morbid. So I have ADHD and autism coexisting. And so I binge like several shows at the same time. Like it'll depend on how I'm feeling that day, but I'll watch, right now I've been re-binging Doctor Who to prep for the new season. Yeah. And I've at the same time, so I've re-binging 3 different shows back to back. So I'll finish one episode of one and then I'll move on to the other and then the other. Or like I'll watch a different show in a different time in the day. Like in the mornings, I watch a lot of the old seasons of The Office. And then at night, I'm binging a lot of Doctor Who and a lot of, what's the other show I was watching? I'm starting to get into anime.
Okay.
It's very hit and miss for me. I think that I like a very particular style of anime, not necessarily art style, but like writing style. Mm-hmm. To be honest, I joke that I think I like animes where the characters come off very autistic. Like, I don't know if you've seen Delicious in Dungeon.
No.
It's sort of fantasy themed anime that's based on a manga that was written by a girl whose father wrote fantasy. And it incorporates a little bit of like D&D mechanics, but it's primarily fantasy novel based. And it's a fun watch because the American dub is very like not satirical, but like quirky and
yeah.
It's hard to compare it to another show. I don't know if you've ever seen Third Rock from the Sun.
Yes.
It kind of feels like if that was an anime about Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. Like how you got there with that.
Yeah.
Good description.
So I've been watching a lot of that. I started watching something recent called Sakamoto Days, which I think is a hilarious concept. It's like, I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix. It's essentially like if John Wick finally like got his happy ending and then like 15 years later was like a middle-aged chubby man that ran a grocery store. It's very funny.
Oh, I think I would like that.
But yeah, for some reason, like people always expect me to like anime. I think there's a weird connotation between being autistic and like being nerdy. So people expect me to be into specific things. And I feel like it always disappoints them when I'm not. But I have found some animes that I do like regularly enjoy to the point where I can watch the whole show all the way through.
It's funny you should say that because I've tried to get into anime several times because I feel like I'm expected to by my people. Like, but I can't. But I think I don't know. I hyper focus on things. I do not have ADHD. I think I have the opposite. I have OCD. So I will stay on something for out like days. I will focus on something. And and I just like to think about it while I'm not watching it. I'm thinking about like what the characters might. Do you ever do this? Be into a show, and then when you're not watching the show, you wonder what the characters are up to. Do you ever do that?
Sometimes I think the close. So that, for some reason, it made me think of this. I don't necessarily do that all the time. I do think about like how characters would act in like. I think this is kind of what you're saying. Right? I think about scenarios that aren't in the show but do maintain the universe, and like think about how those characters would act in that. I also do this thing when I listen to music where I start creating stories and characters based on like the not necessarily the lyrics but like the tone of the music.
Yeah.
I never released any of it, but in my early 20s, because I'm about to turn 30. I was working on a comic book series where that was essentially the concept was the story was being influenced by the music I was listening to, and the art and title page would be whatever like series of songs or song inspired that part of the story. So like the title wouldn't necessarily correlate to the story itself, but like if I was listening to a lot of Outkast when I wrote that particular issue, then that would be the title of that particular issue. Mm-hmm. There was something else I was going to say, but I started moving on to there.
I guess you and I kind of write fan fiction in our minds.
Yeah.
But I've never written it down, but I do it in my mind. Fan fiction.
Trying to think. I had like another question. This is another thing. This is what like where ADHD is a struggle is when I talk about one thing for too long, I forget what I had next prepared. I think that it's for different reasons, but I also have an OCD diagnosis. I thought that was interesting that we both have that.
Oh yeah, it goes along with autism quite often.
Yeah, I've seen that there's like a higher correlation. My personal theory on that is that OCD usually seems to coincide with the consistent experience of low level to high level trauma. And that was a thing that like I was speculating well into middle school, but that was an interesting thing that I started discovering was an actual concept and not just in my head, was the idea of low level trauma. I don't know if that's the specific term used from a psychiatric sense, but like I think that when people think of trauma, they think of singular instances where something granular happened, like something
right.
But I think that there's a lot of examples of what I would consider low level where it's like it's something that is consistent and impactful in the long term, but isn't immediately acknowledged in the moment. Like I'm trying to think.
Maybe like bullying or like
like bullying, or even not even bullying, even like when you're around someone who's like snarky and doesn't always realize how much
Yeah, it's hurting you, affecting you. Yeah. I have a question for you. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Do you remember when your OCD started? Because for me, I remember I was fine, and then one day I wasn't. Like I was in second grade, and I was sitting in the family room watching TV, and it was raining outside. It was kind of cloudy, and we were getting ready to go to. My brother was supposed to run like a race that day, like my older brother. So I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden, I felt like the clouds just fell on me, and I got this intense feeling of dread and doom and gloom. And all of a sudden, I started getting like these really intrusive thoughts, and then I felt guilty about the intrusive thoughts, and then I kept getting these these urges to do repetitive actions, and it all just started, like literally like hit me and started. And before that I had started developing tics. I had really bad tics as a kid, and but like back then, see, no one knew, and I would try to hide them. But then the OCD started. It was awful. It was awful. It's gotten better as I got older, and I'm on medication for it now, but it was can I say bitch? It was a bitch.
Yeah.
It was awful. And I remember the exact day, the exact moment when it hit me. I don't know if it's like that for everybody, but I just thought I'd ask you if you have a similar or a different experience.
I remember there was a lot of different like key moments in my journey with being diagnosed OCD. I was diagnosed around the same time as my autism and my ADHD, which I learned later is like a very rare thing to happen. Like not to have all three, but to have all three acknowledged at the same time is like an incredibly rare circumstance. And in for a while, it actually made me question whether or not it was in my head. But I do remember key moments. There wasn't a specific like, oh, this is what I have now, but there was a lot of key moments where I do acknowledge my understanding of the situation changed. The first time I actually found out what OCD was, even though I know I'd seen examples of it before, the first time I actually remember hearing the term obsessive compulsive disorder and the like description of what it was actually an episode of Scrubs. I forget what the actual episode is. The 2-part episode guest starring Michael J. Fox, who would later come out as having
Just Parkinson's.
Parkinson's. I always think Lou Gehrig's. I'm like, that's not that. That's someone else. It's a baseball player. But that episode registered with me heavily because, especially now that I'm an adult and I rewatch it, there's a lot of instances where you can kind of see Michael J. Fox using a lot of, I believe, his personal experience with hiding his disability and that manifesting in the character. And the character seems genuine and the character seems real with his OCD because you can see where he is constantly worrying about things and it is constantly manifesting, but he has to be a functioning surgeon and physician. So he plays it off and he lets people think it's quirkiness and he lets people feed into their own individual ideas of it because as long as he's in control of how he perceives and handles it, that's all that matters to him. Like throughout the episode, people are taking digs at him, especially someone who's like jealous of his prowess when it comes to memorization. Yeah. And he seemingly ignores them, but he doesn't turn down when they challenge him because and something about that always felt like he's not just doing that to show off to be, you know, a shitty person. He's doing that because he knows he has to prove himself because he struggles 2-3 times harder than anyone around them and they don't notice and he can't let them notice. He has to be a functioning person. And it culminates in the ending of that episode where he kind of has a breakdown because he's in a new environment. He's meeting new people. Everyone wants to show him off. So he's being social when he doesn't really want to. He's being physically active at the same time, and he's reacting to things without people knowing, and it accumulates in him like stuck at the end of the episode. It's like 8 p.m. Nobody else is in the hospital, but he's still washing his hands. And that's something that really registered with me because
wow.
I
want to see that episode.
It's a very good, I want to say it's like season 2 or 3. They're not interns anymore, but they are residents, so they're still in training. But that was a big moment for me, and that made me pay more attention to like these things I do that I realized that I do remember it clicked in my head that I had certain tics and habits that people would often comment on, but that I would ignore because I assumed it was like normal and they were just, you know, bugging on me because I was a kid and they were adults. Like I seem to, when I'm stressed and I'm walking, especially when I'm walking with other people, I keep a pace and I don't always realize that I'm counting my steps. It was like little things like that, or like I have a weird thing. Some people have like specific numbers that they gravitate towards. One of my things is less specific to the number and more specific to the equality I prefer even numbers to odd numbers, and odd numbers make me really uncomfortable.
Really? I'm an odd numbers girl.
That's fine. I think part of it is, I think it manifested for other reasons, but I think what drove this specific thing to formulate was I grew up in a household with four brothers, and there were a lot of circumstances in which we were made to share. And so if things weren't exactly even, some kid was always left out. Or if someone was like the last to get something, then they were getting, the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. And not to say that my parents weren't providing or anything. It's just like, like sometimes my dad would barbecue, and when you barbecue, you're not making a specific number. You're just making a bunch of food and hoping everyone gets some. And then like, if I'm distracted by something I'm hyper focused on, and then I get there, my brothers have had like 3 or 4 hot dogs each, and then there's only like 2 left because they waited so long to get stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's specifically where the anxiety comes. Sorry, I tapped my mic. I don't think that's specifically where the anxiety comes from. I do think that fed into an already existing anxiety and manifested by the time I was in high school. So it was a thing of like, anytime I could avoid an odd number, I would go out of my way to do so, unless it was like actively, sometimes even if it was actively like inhibiting my ability to move on in the day. And there was a lot of things like that, to be honest, manifested more as I got older. So even though that started around middle school, it wasn't at its full like potency till high school. There was a lot of anxiety in high school, and there was a lot of, and I think it was a lot of transitioning, out of adolescence into puberty.
Yeah,
and
high school just sucks in general.
Yeah, high school is a big like emotional trigger, I think, for a lot of people. Awful. It was so funny. We used to see like, me and my brother used to joke because you'd go on Facebook and there'd be people like posting like, these are the best years of your life, da 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 da, and me and my brother Dominic would specifically be like, we're gonna hate. Like, I don't think there's any of this that I'm gonna look back and be like, that was the best. Like, no, I hate all of it.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
I mean, there were some good moments, some good people, but yeah, it definitely got worse. The interesting part was when I sort of had to start functioning on my own after I graduated. I was still living at home, but eventually things, shifted a little bit. My mom moved in with someone else. My brothers bought my grandmother's like family home, our old home. And so for a short stint, I want to say like the bulk of my mid-20s, I was living with roommates. And my landlord was my brother, and he did like live on the property, but he didn't live in the house. I lived with like other people for the first time. And so I was kind of like pushed into a situation where my masking started developing more rapidly, because it's also when I started doing stand-up. And these things that were a struggle that I would in normal circumstances have been accommodated for by my family, I started to have to learn to deal with without them. And that was an interesting circumstance. And a lot of it specifically was my obsessive compulsive disorder, my panic disorder, because I want to say between 21 and 25, I would consistently have panic attacks to the point where they put me on sertraline, which is a lower form of Zoloft. And so, sorry, sort of to go back to your original question, I don't think it was like a single day where things switched for me, but I do think there was a lot of specific days where I had understood how things had changed from how they used to be when I was younger.
Right. So you did notice it. But it was a little more drawn out.
Yeah, it was over time, and a lot of it was a lot more retrospective. Like,
yeah.
I, as an adult, was starting to understand why I was doing things as a child.
Yeah.
More of that sense. We're at 40 minutes. So I think that's good. I'm just trying to figure out how to segue into. Thank you again for being on the show. We're going to start rounding it out soon, but before we go, if there's anything else you want to plug, you have the book that's already out, which is Shouting at Leaves.
Yes.
I believe it's available, like physical copies, but also it's available online, right?
Yes. Yes.
You have your blog, which is, what is it?
Oh, my vlog, my YouTube channel.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, my YouTube channel and my film that's gonna come out.
And your film, which was I like the
called
title of your film.
Yeah, The Fish Don't Care When It Rains. Fun fact, that was originally a song that I wrote, and then I turned it into a short film, and now it's going to be a feature film.
Last thing I'll ask before we officially like say goodbye, can I ask where that title comes from, or where both titles came from?
Yes. So, The Fish Don't Care When It Rains actually came from a conversation. I was fishing with my support person here where I live. We have a couple lakes with fish,
Right.
and it started to rain, like drizzle. And I did not want to go in. I was perfectly happy to sit there. And my support person was like, Jen, it's raining. I think we need to go inside. And I said, the fish don't care. They're already wet. And then it just stuck with me. And I came inside. When I did come inside, I said, I think that could be a song. So I wrote it as a song, but I wrote it as, I'm standing in the rain. Your hold on me has changed. Though you were tough, I'm stronger now. So let it pour on me. Though the water weighs me down, feel it coming. I won't drown. I'm protected from the lightning, and the thunder won't hurt me now.
I really like that.
It's about being pre-disastered. That movie, Life of Brian, I think it was, where he was buying a house, and while he was about to, when he signed the thing, a plane crashes into the house. He's like, it's okay, your house is pre-disastered. Now nothing will ever happen again. Like, so I think of it like that. So anyway, that's where I get the title.
I really like it. Thank you. Well, thanks again for being on the show. We will post any respective links to the movie, to the vlog, and to the book down below if anyone is interested. And I don't really have an outro yet, so for now I'll just say I hope you have a good day. I hope you have a good day, and see you next time.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.